We are in the midst of a fascinating description of how we wrongly identify with the formations of our individuality, and therefore we lose ourselves. The two paragraphs that we have been reading, Sri Aurobindo points out that the central aim of the path of knowledge is the recovery of the self, of our true self-existence, which means that our present mode of being is not our true self-existence. And what it actually is the rest of the theme, and how we get into this false identification. But a key point he highlights here, that we do not accept the solution which declares the universe illusory or false. It is our perception that is false, it is our identification that is false. But the universe we accept as a reality of the self, a reality of its consciousness. And although this universe is fact of the divine, our perception of it and our identification with it is erroneous. So he says, we conceive of ourselves falsely. We see ourselves as we are not. We live in a false relation with our environment because we know neither the universe nor ourselves for what they really are, but with an imperfect view founded on a temporary fiction which the soul and nature have established between themselves for the convenience of the evolving ego. We will come back to this idea repeatedly because it is the larger overarching theme under which the current discussion is taking place. That there is the true soul, the self, and then there is nature, and between the two there is a temporary arrangement, a temporary fiction, which is convenient for the evolution of the ego sense, the sense of an separate identity, which is necessary as a first step in the evolution to form centers of individuality, through which the true self can then begin to express itself gradually. So we are in an early part of the story of evolution. To make a hasty declaration that all this therefore is ignorance and falsehood and illusion would be an error. Rather, we have to see where it is all leading to, and then be able to recognize how it is that we are embedded in a wrong identification, and then find the means for the correction of it and the right identification, which is the theme of the rest of the chapter. He says the error proceeds from a false identification. And there are three, the first of which, the first two we read last time. The first, nature has created within her material unity separate seeming bodies, which the soul manifested in material nature enfolds, inhabits, possesses, uses. We saw these 4 steps by which the soul enters the physical body and its identification. First, surrounding, because the soul self is larger always. And then entering the focus inside, less than outside. And then possessing from within, and then using from within, by which time it has got sufficiently trapped that it feels itself made of the body and not living, not existing without the body identification. The soul, forgetting itself, experiences only this single knot in matter and says, I am this body. It thinks of itself as the body, suffers with the body, enjoys with the body, is born with the body, is dissolved with the body, or so at least it views its self-existence. Now you will see in this whole description the nature of the experience in the body identification that he describes is identity first. I am body, gross body, and therefore suffering with the body, enjoying with the body, born with the body, and dissolving with the body. Now, in all these, you will see something static. There is a passivity. The body exists, with it I am born, with it I die. It suffers, I suffer, it enjoys, I enjoys. You see a passive relationship in an identification, and this is the base of our sense of existence. Next, he takes up the identification with the life energies and then with the mind. And with each of these, you will see how different the nature of the identification and the experience is. So then next he says, again, nature has created within her unity of universal life separate seeming currents of life, which form themselves into a whirl of vitality around and in each body. And the soul manifested in vital nature seizes on and is seized by that current, is imprisoned momentarily in that little whirling vortex of life. Now, in this description, you will find already significant differences. First, we notice that in the continuity of matter, there are these whirls, these knots of materiality. If you looked at matter as formed of an ocean of physical energy, as physics teaches us, and visualize an ocean of energy in which there are whirlpools, whirling movements. They appear for a while and then they dissolve. In the material domain, in the form of our body, our gross physical body is made up of numerous tiny whirlpools that we call particles of matter, which combine to form more complex whirlpools, which combine to form more and more complex through atoms, molecules, cells, organs, and then the whole body. So when we look at our gross physical body in this sense, it is formed of whirling energies in a complex movement, so complex that we are unable to distinguish, and so rapid that we do not see movement anymore. It appears to us like a stable form. But essentially, it is a whirl of physical energy in the continuity of physical matter. Because the whirl of energy here, let's say, between these two hands, there is equally the same energy as there is inside the hands. But because the movement of energy in between is not whirling in repetition, we do not see it as fixed substance. We see it as emptiness. The same energy as it passes through the patch of finger goes through a repetitive whirl and moves on while the rest of the energy repeats the whirl. And so the sustained repetition gives the sense of a form which is fixed. But the density of energy in empty space and in the material substance is the same because it is one flow which is moving around in a complex pattern. So to the soul which has identified with the body, there is this cut-out piece. It has forgotten that there is this wholeness of continuity of matter. Nature has the unity of matter in which she forms these worlds, and the soul has now latched on to one whirl. But the same pattern exists in the domain of life force and of mind. There is one universal life force within which there are whirling movements. And within her unity of universal life, nature has created separate seeming currents of life which form themselves into a whirl of vitality around and in each body. Before even we enter this, notice that the whirl of vitality could exist without the body. Nature could form those whirls without a physical body supporting, and you would still have these knots of energy forms. Except that if you met such a knot, you would not recognize it with physical eyes because it is not attached to a material form. If you saw with subtle sight, you would say, oh, there is a disembodied spirit. Isn't it? Only because she has organized that knot around the physical form, we see the physical form and sense the energy, although we do not see the energy directly unless we see with clairvoyant sight. But the form of the energy, the way he describes, and Sri Aurobindo is extremely precise with his words and with the concepts. We must keep in mind each word is significant, the context of the word is significant, and the sequence of the word and ideas is also important. So he says, separate seeming currents of life which form themselves into a whirl of vitality around and in each body. And the suggestion here is that first the formation is around, and then it merges with the inner also. If you had to experience this in out of body experience, let's say your vital body separates temporarily from the physical. Where is your vital energy whirl? It is away from the gross physical body. It can exist independently. There is a thread of consciousness which links, which allows you to come back to this. If the thread is cut, you find it difficult or unable to come back. But in principle, the thread could be connected to anything. So in the return, as this whirl of energy, which is my vital body, approaches the gross physical, the experience is of entering into the body. Because I existed outside, my existence was larger than the gross physical body's size. And I am now entering, penetrating, and identifying from within out rather than from outside in. So in the formation of this whirl of vitality, the first reality is something larger than the body. And then the second step is the organization of it in the body. Now in practice, in our waking consciousness, both exist. There is a world which is larger, which we then see in clairvoyant sight as our aura. There's a part of the world which is inside, not only free-flowing as the outer one, but a part which is inside which then gets embedded into the gross physical. That's where the identification of the life force and the material body takes place. And in this part which is embedded in the gross body, there is a sense of entanglement, attachment with the gross physical. This is the reason why it's so difficult to separate from the physical body. Even if you try, you want to have an out-of-body experience, lie down, relax, try to float. You feel floating, you feel loose and light, but you don't separate easily. It takes effort to separate, and generally when people have a first out-of-body experience, the separation is accompanied by a sense of a tingling sensation or a buzzing sensation of a wrenching feeling. And it's tingling because the points of contact where the life force is embedded in the gross body are disengaging. And so little things are happening in little dots all over the whole body consciousness. Not only on the surface of skin where you would feel tingling, you feel tingling inside the substance of the body all over. It's a very strange experience. You're sensing things inside, but it's inside sensed in the vital body much more than in the physical body. And then suddenly you're free and you can float around. Similarly, in the point of return, there is this reconnection and re-entanglement. If at the time of wandering, there is a sudden shock on the physical body by a sound or a contact, somebody touches and tries to shake you from your sleep, the shock pulls you, the vital body is pulled back hard and slams into the physical. But because it did not have time to re-enter and smoothly reconnect, these tendrils have not fully entangled themselves properly. So you wake up with a shock, your whole body is shaking from the shock, you're unable to function normally, your mind is in a daze, your body is in a daze, and sometimes even you're in a state where you find yourself unable to move. I'm conscious of my body, but I can't move it. It's as if frozen. And at that point, the more you struggle, the more the tension complicates this reconnection. And the right way is to simply relax and allow the reconnection to take place. The life energy has its own instinct and alignments, which then those fine tendrils move around and attach themselves and penetrate the body. In that state where you feel your body but are unable to move, the reconnection has not been fully completed. So you feel it because your vital body is now infused in the physical, but because of lack of reconnection, you're unable to move. As the reconnection takes place gradually, all this trembling, shaking from the shock settles, and you find you can move your body and control it normally again. A similar shock can take place also if you're in a daydream and a part of your mental consciousness, more than the vital, is out, and the shock brings you back. For a brief moment, there's a jerk, a jump, but it's not as painful or as difficult because the mental substance is much more plastic and can reconnect more smoothly. And this is the reason why also when you suddenly wake up from sleep because of an alarm, the shock of returning rapidly makes you forget your dream. At the moment of the shock, you have a memory of a dream, quite vivid, intense, because you're still making a transition. But the moment the consciousness re-engages with the gross physical, the memory fades because your consciousness now attaches to the memory of the gross body, which is much more dull. And the memory of the vital body or the mental body is left behind and fades out in the dullness of the gross physical. And so when you train yourself to become conscious in sleep or to remember dreams, you do not put these sharp, strong alarms. Rather, you wake up gradually, slowly, make a very smooth transition, reconnecting with the body without moving the gross body, recall the dream, and so on. So, all of this is implied in this description when he's simply saying a whirl of vitality around and in each body. And in the engagement, he says, and the soul manifested in vital nature seizes on and is seized by the current. We touched upon this last time, but it's worth exploring in more detail. Unlike the physical body, where the consciousness enters and inhabits, possesses, and then uses, where the body is relatively passive to the whole experience, the life force is different. It is sticky, it is dynamic, it has its own pull and push. And so the moment you engage with the vital energy, it also entangles with you, and there's a double connection. You may want to enter into it to experience what does it feel like, and then it sucks you in like quicksand. And this is the reason why we so easily get entangled with other people's problems. We sit down to try to help somebody, we listen to their problems, and they're narrating a whole story of how painful certain experiences or emotional experiences were. And as you listen, a part of you is leaning into that thing, and before you realize it, something of your consciousness has got in, identified with that experience, and you find yourself now empathic. You begin to feel what they are feeling. You suffer with their suffering. You feel like crying when they are crying. Or even if it's not so obvious, after they go away, you come back to your work and you suddenly find you're listless. Something is not interesting. You feel tired or you feel depressed. Where did this come from? And if you're not conscious, you may think it's your own. The reality is your life energy entangling in theirs caught the infection. And it stayed with you. Perhaps in the process, the other person was freed. They may tell you afterwards, after talking to you, I felt so good. I was the one feeling good before talking to you, and now you feel good and I feel terrible. You just switched the energy bundles. But this kind of energy exchange is so common and yet so unknown to people, especially when we are in large crowds and our extended energy interpenetrates with others. It very quickly blends into the group consciousness. If you're sitting next to each other in a theater, watching a movie, and there is a scene of great pathos or passion, as others identify with it, you find yourself sucked into that same mood with an intensity that perhaps you would not have felt on your own, sitting at home alone and watching the same movie. You are carried by the group energy. You have trained yourself as part of your spiritual discipline to not get swayed by emotions, to stand back from emotions, to let the mind rule and guide them and all that. But suddenly in that theater, you lose everything. Where is all my training and control? It's as if gone. This is the reason behind what is described as crowd psychology. The name itself suggests that there's a very different psychology involved in a crowd, in a mob behavior, different from individuals. And it is not the sum of individuals. It is as if the group as a whole becomes a separate person. And while initial influences may have been formed from the individuals, the person that is now formed here by this collective mix of energy eventually rules each individual and overwhelms them. And if the initial infusion was something strongly violent, even the people who contributed a few violent feelings find themselves swayed by far greater violence. And the group now is like an individual ruling and using these little people who are all victims of this larger group. If you observe images, videos of rock concerts or parties where people are screaming, shouting, and jumping, you can immediately see there is no person there. There is the group which is doing something, and it's working itself out through these separate bodies. And they are completely enslaved by that energy. They may come away afterwards still full of that energy, and it often takes a day or 2 or 3 days for the imprint to wear off. And for those who keep going back to such activities, very quickly their personality becomes warped by the repeated imprints of these energies. And they may even get so desensitized that they need now this hard vital stimulation to feel anything. Anything subtler, finer becomes almost meaningless or too flat. It's only when they stay away for more than a few weeks that gradually their old sensitivity begins to return, and they wonder what happened. I seem to have lost my way. Same thing can happen even in smaller groups of friendships. It's the reason why in our tradition, parents are so concerned about who your friends are, with children especially. Because without knowing it, just the fact that you spend half an hour or 1 hour with friends, you swallow, you absorb. Especially the weaker, those with weaker vitality absorb the imprints from the stronger vitality. You end up speaking like them, behaving like them, thinking like them. And so the community, the collectivity in which the individual lives, exercises a great influence on the individual, greater than the individual exercises on the collective. And that's why it makes such a big difference when we live in a spiritual community, when there are similar alignments of thoughts, emotions, refinement of energies, and so on. So, in the nature of life force, the moment you try to seize on, you are seized by the current. And the next step, when it seizes you in the relationship that is stronger, is imprisoned momentarily in that little whirling vortex of life. You're sucked in like quicksand, your feet have got stuck. You're unable to disengage, and after a while you forget, because the imprint of life force even clouds your mind, clouds your higher levels of consciousness, even covers and closes them. And now I am just this. If I were to give an analogy, if you've ever been on a, what they call a 3D ride, simulation ride. Sometimes they have these at airports or at theme parks. You go into this little box which is set on some pistons. It can move. You're shown a movie, and the box moves with the image of the movie. So it feels like you're on a roller coaster. Maybe you have 3D glasses so you can see in depth. And the box moves just to synchronize with the picture, and you feel that you're going rapidly, you're moving fast, forward, high, low, and all that. And they tell you initially, if you feel giddy, close your eyes for a while. Sometimes you get so overwhelmed by this, you are scared. and something, because you sense that actually there is no physical movement and yet it feels like there's a physical movement. That disconnect creates a giddiness. What happens when you close your eyes? You disconnect from this identification. You're so easily sucked into the identification that it feels real, it is your reality, but something is so strange in this reality that you feel uncomfortable. You close your eyes and you disconnect. The same thing could happen if you were in a crowd, where you're overwhelmed by the crowd. If you could close your life energy channels, you could disconnect and say, oops, this is not really my place. In a movie, we do that. You will see children, especially when they watch a scene which is too intense, or little children get uncomfortable with something which is too romantic. Immediately, they'll break away from their gaze and start looking at each other and laughing or giggling. Because at that point, the connection with that emotion doesn't make sense, or it is uncomfortable. But the moment the action scene starts, they are glued. Their eyes don't blink and they're fully in it. So this ability to break out and reconnect is inherent in us. But when the soul thus gets sucked into the life force, the imprisoning effect is so strong because it is sticky. It even pulls your mind, pulls your will. You find your will is helpless against its pull. And so there is a sense of being imprisoned momentarily in that little whirling vortex of life. Momentarily, in the context of the soul's journey across lives. If you had recollection of the last 2000 years of your journey, one life is a momentary identification with the world. It's not such a big thing. So I reread this sentence. You see how much is captured in it. Again, nature has created within her unity of universal life separate seeming currents of life, which form themselves into a whirl of vitality around and in each body. And the soul manifested in vital nature seizes on and is seized by that current, is imprisoned momentarily in that little whirling vortex of life. But now notice the identification is first in the life force rather than the material body. Material body is only a support for the life force to attach around in the physical world. And so he says, the soul, still forgetting itself, says, I am this life. It thinks of itself as the life, craves with its cravings or desires, wallows in its pleasures, bleeds with its wounds, rushes or stumbles with its movements. And you see the difference with the physical body. With the physical body, it's more the sense of existence. With the life energy, it is more the sense of movement. And the words he is using, thinks of itself as the life, craves with its cravings. So there's a movement of craving, needing, reaching out, wanting to fill a lack or desires. Wallows in its pleasures. Again, this movement of absorbing the pleasure, enjoying and identifying with it. But the pleasure itself is an ongoing process. Bleeds with its wounds. There's a sense of losing something, as with pleasure, there's a sense of taking in. With the bleeding, with the wounds, there is losing energy. Rushes or stumbles with its movements. The life energy starts acting up, and you need to get up and rush. The life energy is restless, you find yourself getting restless. So the whole drive is of the energy pulling and pushing, and it is the active, kinetic character which is stronger. You will see between the three, the body, gross body, physical body, life body, and mind body. The inertia dominates in the physical body. The kinesis dominates in the life body. And the balance dominates in the mind body. Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva are the characteristics of these bodies. Of course, within that, we teach the body to develop its own kinesis. We teach the life force to have its own balance. We teach the mind, so on. But temperamentally, these three grades of consciousness have these characteristics to begin with. But now, in this identification of the life energies, there are still two variations. They make for two different types of humanity. If it is still mainly governed by the body sense, it identifies its own existence with that of the world and thinks, when this world is dissipated by the dissolution of the body round which it has formed itself, then I shall be no more. So, this is the first type. The type, though identified with life force, I am life force, feels itself much more governed by the body sense and identifies its existence with that world. So, my life force is organized around the body base. When the body base goes, the life force will have nothing to hold on. There'll be no center and it will dissipate. I will therefore dissipate. The picture we may have here would be of a magnetic field. You have the electromagnet, you pass a current through this coil of wire, and boom, there's a field sticking out, magnetic, pulling, pushing. But you switch off the current in the wire, the field collapses because it has no base, no support anymore. Or you can have the image of a candle flame around the wick. If there's no wick, where will the flame form out of? Where will it go? It is extinguished. So the sense is of the life force resting on the base of the body, dependent on the body as its nucleus center around which to organize its world. And so the sense is I will be dissipated by the dissolution of the body round which it has formed itself. Then I shall be no more. But I am still life force, leaning on the body for base. The other type of humanity, if it has been able to sense the current of life which has formed the vortex, it thinks of itself as that current and says, I am this stream of life. I have entered upon the possession of this body. I shall leave it and enter upon possession of other bodies. I am an immortal life, revolving in a cycle of constant rebirths. So you see the difference here. The identification in the first case is life force dependent on body. In the second case, it is life force independent of body, using body as a temporary base and support through identification, through possession. If you observe the two types, the biggest difference, as he points out here, is one feels I will end with the end of the body. The other feels I am immortal and the body is just one vehicle I will transfer to another. Because of this sense of immortality in the life energy, it is very easy to make the error of thinking this is the true soul, because it is the immortal being transferring across lives, isn't it? That would be the soul. That's what we are taught. Therefore, I am soul, and you can stop with that. It would be a huge error, because this is the desired soul at best. It is still a toy formed by nature's whirling rhythms and habits. You are not truly you and free. You are formed by nature's bundle of habits. You're a puppet of her energy flows. If she intensifies your energy, you feel yourself intense. If she dulls your energy, you feel yourself dull. That's not the true soul. The true freedom comes when you go behind all that. But you see, because of the sense of immortality, one can feel as if this is the soul. A very common error in early stages, or in many people who have this experience spontaneously, have read a little bit but not really understood the deeper realities. And this is their identity. It feels so good that they don't want to give it up. One of the characteristics of this type of person is they're always full of energy. They want to do things. They feel they can do anything. They can overcome anything. There is no problem that they cannot somehow compel to yield to their vitality, their will, and their persistence. And they have a great sense of joie de vivre, which is a very joy of life, joy of living, which is a very nice thing. It is infectious. They can spread it to others. But equally, because the vitality is their primary identity, if the vitality has something distorted, strongly depressive, strongly angry, or even if there's something perverse, that also can infect others very quickly. Such people would tend to become natural leaders effortlessly, even as children, but much more easily seen as children when the vitality is still developing. You see some signs, but much more clear when they have organized their personality and the vitality is now well built. The reason for that leadership is because their vitality being their identity, when they want something from you, they reach out to you with their vitality. And the vitality enters you, seizes you, and pulls you, turns your feelings, molds your emotions, and pulls your thoughts. So when they compel you, it is not by asking, it is not by begging, it is a command. Come with me. And you find yourself just pulled. Well, I have work to do. It's all right. Come. Okay, but I have to get back quickly. And never had a chance. I got sucked in by the vitality straight away. If I have an equally strong vitality, equally compelling, the person senses it. And he will either end up avoiding because he likes being with people who yield to him easily. So he will avoid those who don't yield to him so easily. Or there'll be a subtle tension, a subtle pull and push. And whoever is at that point stronger will overwhelm the other for a while. But they are conscious, they sense it. When people with strong vitalities, when two of them enter the same space, they immediately know each other. They sense that character. There's this famous phrase which is used in cowboy stories. This town ain't big enough for both of us. One strong vital tells that to another. Why? Because my space of vitality needs its large domain to rule, where I will wield, I will rule, I will dominate. And your vitality is trespassing in my space. One of us has to move out. Interestingly, this is not very different from animals, where depending on the species and the group consciousness, they need a certain space for the herd, which is theirs. Two herds will move away from each other to maintain that approximate space, but it's sensed energetically. They don't have to look and coordinate with GPS and mobile phones. They sense the energy and they keep their distances. And the same thing you will see within the herd, the individual who represents the king consciousness, the dominant consciousness, he presides over the herd. And when he gives a knock, everybody else obeys. And he is the center for that circumference of their area, territory. And that's why they say, for example, with lions or elephants, that when human beings encroach into their space, they push back. And of course, we end up killing them in the process for our safety. But we are the ones who encroach. They try to move away, but if you cut in, after a while they are suffocating, because on some level they feel this space necessary to feel free. So these two are types. The type of the vital which identifies with the body, the type of the vital which knows itself free of the body using bodies. And between the two, we will use this vocabulary. Sri Aurobindo uses this term, lower vital and higher vital. The lower vital is the part of life energy which has entangled in the body and is therefore dependent on and weakened by the body's dullness, capacity or incapacity. If the body is strong and expansive, then it finds itself capable of expressing more fully. If the body is weak or fragile, the vitality must remain dulled to match the body's capacity. But in the second case, you have the vital which is more free and able to be itself naturally. And this we would describe as the higher vital. Higher because when left to itself and not dulled by the body's pettiness and needs, it is much more generous, it is much more sharing, it is much more wide. more truly of its higher character. One can, of course, consciously train oneself to disengage the life force identification with the body and recover its sense of freedom. This happens, and this we would consider a superior state if one can train oneself to enter it. This happens automatically as a result of certain types of activities or exercises. So when somebody is physically dull, weak, not enough energy, you get them into an exercise regimen. When they're exercising regularly for a while, and especially exercises which involve exchanging energy with the universe. So that would be what we call aerobic. You're taking in air, breathing out air, that's the energy exchange. Pranayam in a modified form. You're exchanging energy with the universe and in a physical activity. And if you push limits a little bit, you will find very quickly there is this sense of swelling up of your energy and you feel good. So every day when I do my exercises, I start with a little dullness, but after half an hour or 1 hour, I feel good. My body is tired from the exercise, but I feel good. Who is this I feeling good? The I identifying with the life force, not with the body. So you've been pushed by the exercise and the energy infusion from the exchange to a expansion of consciousness entering in the vital body much more than the physical. And at that time, it feels like I can do anything. You catch the person coming out of the gym with this feel good and tell them, do you think you can do this? Oh, yes, I can do anything. The fellow who went in was the fellow who said, no, I'm too tired, I can't do it. You notice this shift also takes place when there is any kind of excitement. Things which you put a person on a roller coaster. Because of the nature of the experience, there is a high and there's an excitement, and automatically the consciousness shifts more in the energy consciousness than in the body substance. You come out of the roller coaster and the person suddenly sees the world differently, more from the vital than the physical. And at that point, if you challenge the person to gamble, he's much more likely to gamble. Because the vitality is now swaying him and he feels like I'm a winner, I can do anything. Feels like that. The same person before he gets on the roller coaster will not. He'll be much more careful because he's much more in the physical consciousness and the mind is clearer. It's not been dulled by the chaos of the energy dance. So often you will find in theme parks or in casinos or even in large malls, they create an experience of excitement early on so that after that you find yourself spending wildly. You've lost self-control, your mind and its objectivity has been clouded by the energy movements, and you end up doing things and you wonder, what happened? I thought I was just going to buy this one thing, I came out with 5 bags and I've spent all my weeks or months budget. What happened? And you shake it off thinking, oh yeah, it's good, I felt nice. Once in a while, it's all right. You don't realize you were manipulated. But these things are consciously done because people understand that this is how we can modify human behavior. So the problem when you get into this more expansive vitality is you are as much a victim of the vital energies and their drives as you may think that I have now become more free, more strong. These are observations generally because they are useful for us to recognize these tendencies in us. And the correction will be to take a step higher in the sattvic temperament of the mental consciousness and have that preside and train the vital and the physical. So we come now to the third knot. But again, nature has created within her mental unity, formed in the universal mind, separate seeming dynamos, as it were, of mentality. Constant centers for the generation, distribution, and reabsorption of mental force and mental activities. Stations, as it were, in a system of mental telegraphy, where messages are conceived, written, sent, received, deciphered. And these messages and these activities are of many kinds: sensational, emotional, perceptual, conceptual, intuitional, all of which the soul manifested in mental nature accepts, uses for its outlook on the world, and seems to itself to project and to receive their shocks, to suffer or to master their consequences. So it's a long sentence, but capturing a whole experience and many levels of the experience in a single imprint. So here you see a shift in the vocabulary, where earlier he described the physical as separate seeming bodies, in the vital separate seeming currents of life, and here he uses the term separate seeming dynamos, as it were, of mentality. And then he uses term of mental telegraphy. These two terms give you something which is, we have to recognize also in the context when this was written 100 years ago. Telegraphy was something very new. It would be the equivalent of what we use today as mobile phones or mobile broadcasting towers, radio towers. But the analogy is the same, the concept is still the same. But the dynamo is also an important concept. It was, remember, at this point, barely 10 or 15 years that electricity had become now widely available because of the development of the alternating current transmission system. Dynamos represented something very vivid in the human consciousness as something which can generate a stream of energy and through that energy send a message across great distances. That's what the generator, the dynamo is. And it is this which is held when you think of the mind force here. The dynamo does something, a whirl also, a movement, spinning, whirling, but a whirl of mental energy. In the mental unity formed in the universal mind, nature has created separate seeming dynamos, as it were, of mentality. So the mental consciousness in a whirl, repeating a rhythm, a pattern, but through that is able to generate something which ripples out and can go into great distances carrying information, carrying force, carrying energy, mental energy, but with it, informational content. The life energy, when it reaches out, imprints on you an emotion, a state of emotions. But the mind content not only can imprint on you a state of mind, but bring into it specific knowledge, specific information. It can teach you things which you did not know, and which you can then apply, translate, and do things with it. So, dynamos, as it were, of mentality, constant centers. So the center is constant, the movement may be inconstant. Constant centers for the generation, distribution, and reabsorption of mental force and mental activities. Okay. Oh, okay. You want to stop that? Yeah. Is it disturbing? Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So in the transmission of the knowledge, there's a generation, distribution, and reabsorption. Now the whole vocabulary is so similar to the telegraph system, because telegraphy is in fact, as Sri Aurobindo points out in the Life Divine, a first material representation of a power of the mind. Sri Aurobindo makes a very interesting comment in the Life Divine. He says, all of what we call technology is an attempt to organize in matter powers and processes natural to the higher domains of consciousness. And in the first organization, It uses much more the material substance, base, and processes in a more crude way. But subsequent refinement of technology is only reducing the extent of involvement of material process, the extent of reliance on matter, and subtilizes and miniaturizes more and more at each step until it approaches a vanishing point and merges into the mind's normal direct action of consciousness. Now imagine all this is written in the Life Divine 100 years ago, which describes the arc of technological development. You start with the effect in gross, dense matter. It looks like it's the only way to do it. And then you discover you can do it with less matter, less energy, smaller, lighter processes of nature. And it keeps improving until at some point, and he mentions this in the Life Divine, the telegraph, which depends on the physical wire, you can remove the physical wire and have a radio link. And then after some time, even the radio link will be removed and there'll be pure mind link. By that time, the transmitting and receiving apparatus will be so close to the brain that the material part of it could vanish and there would be direct contact of the mind with mind. You notice how this has actually happened. From the telegraph, yes, we went into radio transmission. In the telegraph link itself, we bounced it around the world through the satellites. But then quickly, the machine which was transmitting became smaller and smaller. And I remember the first advertisement we saw of a really small mobile phone. There's this woman sitting in a restaurant and she starts talking in a very affectionate way. And somebody on this other side, on another table, a man looks at her and says, "Me? Oh, you like me?" And she says, "Yeah, we will have a good time. You like me?" And he comes over to her. And then she takes out her hand and in her palm is this little mobile phone. And she says, "Okay, bye." And the fellow moves away. It's so small, you don't even notice it. It's actually become small enough that it can fit inside your ear. The only problem is the battery. The battery, the energy, you want it to work the whole day, and it's also doing so many things. What the computer was doing in a big room 40 years ago has been miniaturized to something which is 1 square centimeter and goes even inside. All the rest, you see what's happened with the mobile phone, everything has got miniaturized. There are two things which are a problem: the screen and the battery. You want enough power because it's doing so many more things. Okay? The screen is where your eyes have to see and your fingers have to touch. And those are still the same size. If your body has not become smaller, our eyes have not become sharper. And so we have to somehow maintain the screen. And there's a third problem was the connectors. In the old days, the connectors were large. They've made them smaller and smaller and smaller. Until now, they've all become wireless. All connections are Bluetooth, right? The tendency is towards miniaturization and abstraction from matter, approaching closer and closer to the direct power of mind, which was represented in the first place in the first effort. And this is the development of the technology. In the process, you notice, our mind is being shaped and is being trained and taught to a point where the use of the mobile phone changes the way we think, because every now and then there's a beep. I look, oh, I just received a message from my friend on the other side of the world who's just having, at this point, breakfast, and he's eating whatever it is, and he sent me a good morning, and I send him a good evening. Or he sends me good evening, I say good morning. We've broken the distance barriers of space and time. And at the same time, I get a blip from somebody who's next door who says, "Are we meeting this evening?" And your mind is being now trained to connect to your sense of relationships across the world. In the old days, the sense of distance was highlighted because you sent a letter, it took a month to get to the other side of the world, and another month for it to come back. And then with aeroplanes, it became a little shorter. But still, it is so far away, it takes a month to get there. Now it's happening as quickly whether you're sitting next to me or sitting across the world. And so the sense of distance has broken. In our own consciousness, our friendship connections are right there. wherever they may be in the world. We're able to meet on the video screen, Skype chat, as if we are just in front of each other. We forget that there is a machinery in between. We connect energetically across distances and in thought, and even almost physically sometimes. And all of this is training us to exceed our limitations of space, time, and smallness of ego sense. And at some point, the technology has reached this stage where you can actually wire into the brain directly. At that point, so physical plugging in is still crude. Much more refined way is wearing this cap, which has about 200 sensors, which watch the brain patterns and respond appropriately on my screen. So as I turn my attention to the left, the car which I'm driving in the computer game moves left. I turn my attention to the right, the car moves right. My hands don't touch anything. With my brain, mind, I control my journey. I drive. Push it to the level of pilots. Sometimes they move at such high accelerations that they can't move their hands. It's perfect. I'm sitting there, and with my mind, I'm guiding the machine, the plane. But as a result, I have to be conscious and trained in my control of awareness. I can't at that point look away and daydream. I can't have my thoughts drift away. I have to hold my mind on the spot, right? In the process, my mind is being trained. The machine is only a temporary link in between. And at some point when my mind is so well trained, and the reception on the other side is so well trained, that we will find even as we begin the point of contact, the machinery in between is almost not needed. I sense what you intend to say. Because I've trained myself to convey with clarity, and you have trained yourself to receive with clarity. There will actually be a point where technology will assist us to make this transition of a direct telepathic contact. It's already happening when you're in this Skype chat. Energetically, you've trained yourself to connect, isn't it? Which could not have happened if you were just doing with physical letters. And the same happening with mind. So the symbol here which he's using is not just a symbol of that period. It is a symbol of a whole journey of technology, all of which is representative of the actual reality of mind. And this describes the reality of mind in the vocabulary of technology. Formed in the universal mind, separate seeming dynamos, as it were, of mentality, constant centers for the generation, distribution, and reabsorption of mental force and mental activities. Now, in the universal continuum of mind, there are these centers formed. If there was a center which was formed momentarily and it dissipates, but it broadcasts something or receives something, but it dissipates, it has not much value. In fact, such centers do exist. We call them thought forms. If you create a strong thought, it moves out of you, tries to actualize itself. Depending on how much energy you put into it, it can be more or less effective, but as its energy is used up, it weakens, it dissipates. Sometimes it dissolves into the universal mind substance, or if there's a strong connection to your personal mental consciousness, it tends to come back to reattach, to draw energy from you and continue its cycle. And you do not realize 20 days ago, when I thought intensely of this thing, I released this thought form which is continuing to suck my mental energy for the last 20 days. I just find that in my sleep, I'm very exhausted. My mind seems to be tired and I don't know why. But all these thought forms I've put out are coming and drawing from me. If you're conscious, you'll find the thought coming back. Oh, this is the thought I had 20 days ago. What's it doing now? And you may just will it or dissolve it, or will the disconnection or dissolution of it. But otherwise, there's so much of our energy which is sucked by past strong energies which we have put out in this way. These are centers, not so constant. They also broadcast, they also are affected, but they don't have the persistence that the individual center of the mind has. That's why he uses the word constant centers, and that's what makes the big difference. Constant centers for the generation, distribution, and reabsorption of what? Mental force and mental activities. These are two different things, though allied. On all levels, there is force, just as there is physical energy, physical force. There's vital energy, vital force. There's mental energy, mental force. And mental force can exert a push. For example, you enter a space where there's some disturbance going on. Because you're a person in authority, you want to exercise a force now to calm the disturbance and bring the focus back on the work. Your mind and your life energies tune in to that intention. If you have not tuned in and you enter with chaos, you're just adding to the chaos and confusion. You enter with a certain force of calming, quieting, and immediately that imprints its influence on their minds. Something begins to happen. The boss walked in and everybody became quiet. Even if I don't know the boss walked in, I sensed and I turned. And that's when it hit me, but I had already become quiet by the influence. So there's a mental force which shifts states. And then there is mental activity, movement, thought form, some particular intention of or content of knowledge. And the two can be separate. The mental force can be without any particular knowledge content or informational message, just an imprint. Is one of the ways in which often yogis influence world circumstances by putting out a strong imprint of a consciousness, originally from a spiritual initiation, but settling into the mind and perhaps even into life energy. But more often than not, it is through the mind and resonating it in the world. A pressure, a turn of the mind consciousness. And the result is, for no reason at all, everywhere in the world, people start thinking differently. One such most dramatic shift that has taken place in the last 60 years, especially I'm pointing to 60 years because it's the anniversary of the supramental manifestation in 1956. If you notice, until then, the whole mindset in humanity was my country against others. United Nations, League of Nations were only conglomerations of interests to prevent unnecessary wars. But the mentality was still protective of my benefits against yours. Across cultures, across nations, countries. After 1956, although the rulers of all these countries still want to maintain that fear and separation and division, because that's how they can manipulate you, in spite of that, the consciousness has shifted. It was obvious in the mid-60s already. In the late 60s, it took an extraordinary form of universal peace, universal love. What is all these barriers? And there's this famous song, if there could be no countries, if there were no religions, you have these ideas coming up. Not that the person thought it the first time. There are many people who spoke about it. So this singer singing it was not doing anything new. But people caught it because people felt the need for that. If it was not him, it was someone else who would have stated it, and that person would have become famous. The actual wording was irrelevant. It was the idea. Suddenly, world peace, no difference, no gaps. We're all together, one big family. Oh, what a beautiful feeling. Where did it come from? And there was nothing in the education, nothing in the government policy, nothing in the propaganda, nothing in events which supported that. It was a power, a spiritual source which imprinted this into the world. And the mother refers to this as the Superman consciousness, isn't it? It's one of the things which manifested at that point and changed things. Such things are happening. We are mostly unconscious of them. When they happen, suddenly there's a shift and we say, how did it happen? When did it happen? Who made it happen? We don't know. But now we think differently. But the push did not put a specific idea. It turned a pressure, a force. It turned you from the mind being like this to this, and everything else follows. Or there can be a strong thought content or an activity content which makes your mind move in a certain way and think in a certain way and act in a particular way. This we will see, for example, in the example Mother gives of the Chinese attack on India in 1964, 62, when the Chinese invaded India, and the Prime Minister was in denial, the army was totally unprepared, and they were just sweeping in. And the Prime Minister kept saying, oh, we are friends, there's no war, while people were being butchered. It was a dangerous point. They could have just run over the whole country. And the Mother says she intervened at that point. To this day, we don't know why the Chinese just went back and everything stayed status quo. She said she intervened at that point and she found the Chinese troops more receptive to her force than the Indian troops. And they just went back, and that was it. But at that point, there was not just a force of consciousness, but actually an activity, something which made people do something and move in a particular way, which got imprinted in a behavior and an outcome. So when we generate, distribute, it is forces and mental activities which are reabsorbed. Now, reabsorption from my mind to yours, from your mind to mine. But also from my mind wandering and then reabsorbing to my own mind as those thoughts which I created, which come back to me. So there's a huge, now consider each human mind as a little knot in this universal mind, radiating things, transmitting, reabsorbing, and retransmitting. And it's going on, bouncing around. Not very different from the picture of the internet. You see, in the internet, we have these, what they call IP addresses. When my computer wants to talk to your computer at the other end of the world, it picks what it recognizes as the closest, who picks to the next closest, who picks the next closest, and it gets bounced around until it reaches you. But something like that is happening in the mental consciousness, bouncing around. A thought, you pick it up, you add to it your own modification, it broadcasts. Someone else picks it up, adds their own modification, it rebroadcasts. And thoughts can ripple around like this in a group, especially in a collectivity, very easily. So mental forces and mental activities, and each one is a station, as it were, in a system of mental telegraphy. Now you see the organization, where messages are conceived, written, sent, received, deciphered. And these messages and these activities are of many kinds. Now again, the steps, he is mapping the steps in a telegraph message. What's happening there? First, you want to send a message. I want to send a message to so-and-so, greeting for a happy birthday. I've conceived this, and I write the message. You remember in the telegraph in those days, they counted by words. So instead of saying, wishing you a very happy birthday, you'll say, wish happy birthday. The minimum words, okay? So you write it out in longhand perhaps, and then there is a sending, receiving and deciphering. Because in the writing out, there is a translation, what you wanted to say to the form it took. In the sending, it would take the form of beeps. Beep, 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 beep. Each letter is reduced to sounds. It gets to the other side, it has to be reversed, deciphered, and converted into the written form and then delivered. Actually, something like that happens in our mind. So you have something you want to say. It takes a certain form. The form itself now transmits in mental substance, reaches you, and there again it is decoded into the feel, the intention which you receive. Now, because of this encoding and decoding, there is always a distortion. So I tell you something, you misunderstand. You respond differently, and since I'm thinking in a different way, I misunderstand. And we have a whole conversation going around. After 5 minutes, wait, something is wrong. Are you talking about this or that? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about that. And then we recorrect. But this is possible because of the translations involved. The translations are not so obvious when you think about how, in words, it's obvious because there is always a dilution, a loss. But in the transmission of thought, it is not so obvious because what you want to say often is a mix of emotions and thoughts. When it actually gets transmitted as a pure thought, it acquires a different character. At the level of pure thoughts, it could be without words, or it could be with words also, formed thought, or just a sense of something, a conception, a feel. And then again, on the other side, there is the decoding. And the messages could be sensational, emotional, perceptual, conceptual, intuitional. I have an emotional sensation. I feel weird. I feel happy. And that goes the sense of happiness physically sensed. And then an emotional content, which is a different kind of joy or an anger or a confusion that I have to translate and send through the mental. Perceptual, I see, I sense, I glimpse something. Or conceptual, I think out something and form my own idea and send. Intuitional, I receive an inspiration. And this I want to transmit. Now, all this is happening at the same time on all these levels, and through the mind, it is transmitting most widely. Unlike life energy links, where he does not describe in the same way, like a telegraphy, there's no system. In the life energy links, when I'm connected to individuals energetically, it is transmitted more easily. But when I'm not connected, it is not rippling out in this way as the mind broadcast ripples out. The life energy flows with affinities. If I have a strong emotion, those who have tendency for similar emotions will catch those emotions more easily. So my emotion released, and often with a certain distance physically, people catch. So if in an apartment complex, you have people living in little cubby holes, which we call apartments, flats, you're sleeping with your bed against the wall. You don't know that just behind that wall, somebody else is sleeping. So physically, your head is about a foot or 2 feet away. Your auras are blending into each other. The other fellow's nightmares are reflecting in your consciousness, or some nasty thoughts he has are hitting you. You don't even know it. Of course, there's a kind of a barrier in our conception which we have in between, but still. And these things are happening across at certain proximity. One person being nasty can affect the sleep of people around without realizing it. But it's not rippling out in the whole world emotionally. But if this person is strongly thinking of somebody else and creates an energetic connection, or the other person is thinking of you and creates an energetic connection, then across the world they would have a link, but not everyone. The thought, though, is different. In the mental plane, much more plastic, free, open. You create a thought form, there's a ripple effect to everyone. You could, of course, release a thought form directed to a person or a situation. You could do that, but otherwise, just the fact of thinking something strongly has a ripple effect. And this is why in thought, we influence ourselves much more widely, freely. When all of us begin to think differently, it has a much more rapid ripple effect. So when you want to change material circumstances, first thing you do is to change how people think. And when the thinking changes, from there it settles on the other parts more easily. And a few nudges on the vital plane or the physical plane will be helpful. But if you have not changed things here, the nudges there don't ripple out so quickly. So all these things are going out, all of which the soul manifested in mental nature accepts, uses for its outlook on the world, and seems to itself to project and to receive their shocks, to suffer or to master their consequences. Now again, here you see it is typically of the substance of mind. It's not enjoying. It is not suffering the experience. It is suffering the consequence of the thought put out. I put out this thought and a chain reaction starts. I cannot take it back. It's an arrow shot. I suffer the consequences or I overcome them and master them. But there's not the sense of enjoyment which is characteristic of life energy. Similarly, there is in the communication, there's a projection and receiving the shock. So when you project, there's something going out from you. When something comes upon you, it impacts. Something wakes up, some thought, some idea, something. And where did this thought come from? I wasn't thinking about it. If you're conscious, you catch the fact that it entered you. If you're sensitive, you feel the quality of the vibes and say, it's coming from that person or from that space, from that group, something. You're able to feel from the vibrational quality. But when it enters, there's a shock in the mental consciousness. Not very strong, but it's still a shock. And the soul accepts these when it identifies with the mental nature and uses for its outlook on the world. This is the way by which it sees and gets to know. But it has the feeling in identification with this mental bundle of I that it is sending out the thought, it is receiving the thought. What's the reality? To the self which is behind, all the thoughts are taking place within its universality. It's neither sending nor receiving, but it is flowing in its one mind substance. But when it identifies with this narrow knot, the dynamo of mind, individualized mind, I am sending, I am receiving. So, Sri Aurobindo continues this description and then puts it in relation with the body. So far, it's purely the mind consciousness and individualized mind dynamo. But this is now linked to the life force and body. Nature installs the base of these dynamos in the material body she has formed. In the material bodies she has formed. Makes these bodies the ground for her stations and connects the mental with the material by a nerve system full of the movement of vital currents, through which the mind becomes conscious of the material world, and so far as it chooses of the vital world of nature. Now, this is a very important idea. We are, in our first identification in individuality, mental beings. And as mental beings, we then enter in engagement with a physical body. So, truth is, we are first of all spiritual consciousness, but in the individualization, we have identified with the mental body first. And this is the reason why in the Veda, you will find this idea repeatedly of the identification with the mind as the true sense of individuality. There is even in the emerging, as you disengage from the identification with the body, into mentality, and the Rishi celebrates that I have become now the thinker, because it's the grade at which the overall evolution of our humanity is at, and that's where the soul first identifies, forms the mind body, and then from there takes on the substance connecting to the gross physical. So nature installs the base of these dynamos in the material bodies she has formed. Again, the vocabulary is very precise. The mental dynamo is still mental dynamo. The base is connected to the body. So you immediately get this sense of a stem resting on the physical body, the flame on the wick. But equally the brain plugging into the gross body. Okay, so if our mind were free consciousness, the point of contact in the physical body is primarily in the region of the brain, and then through the brain into the rest of the nervous system, into the body. So there is and it gets more and more dense as it goes down. So you will see in your mental consciousness, you are much more here. Your feet are below you, right? Where are you in this space? Generally, if you feel your center of mental awareness, you're somewhere here. So your mouth is below you, but your hair is above you. But this is a fluid center. You could shift your mental center to the heart. And when you're fully centered here, you will say your head is above you and your stomach is below you. Right? But naturally, this is the region where the mind awareness centers itself. And then it is hooked into the biology. the base of the dynamos in the material body. You could cut off the base, the mind would still be intact. The mental body would still be I. Only I would find I'm unable to move the body. I'm unable to connect with this body. I'm drifting, floating above, which is what happens at the time of death. You find yourself floating above, and there's the body there, and people are rushing to the body. I'm here, not there. That's my body. Look at me. That link is cut there. And then, with the linking, connecting with the material, connects the mental with the material by a nerve system full of the movement of vital currents through which the mind becomes conscious of the material world. So the link point between mind as it embeds itself into the physical body is the exchange of the life currents, life energies. And the substance of the body most capable of holding life currents in their purity is what we call nerves. And it is in the nerves, therefore, through that substance that mind is able to most directly attach to the gross body. Now, if there was a body which was not very evolved in its nervous substance, doesn't have enough nerves, or the nerves are still not very conductive, not very sensitive, refined, the mind could still connect, but it would be dulled. In the act of attaching to the body, the mind would get dulled because now the thought, as embedded in the body, is unable to free flow, unable to be diverse or rich. And the thinking process slows down, becomes as if wandering in a haze of cloud, can't think clearly. The logical chains, logical picture, seeing in a glow, that's all gone. And I'm struggling, thinking piece by piece. And this is the effect you will find in mind embedding itself in apes, for example, or in lesser evolved animals. Between the ape and the human, they say the difference is in genes is like 0.7% or 1%, according to different measures. The genetic change is only that much, but the primary change is in the refinement of the nervous system. And in the nervous system, two things happen. You have more nerves and finer nerve endings, and the substance in the nerves is more sensitively mental, more sensitive to mental things. Now, if you take a strong, heavy molecule, it's a strong, heavy weight, mind cannot move it easily. It can influence it, but not enough. Something which is very fine and light can be more easily influenced by mind. If there is something which is barely material, but mostly life or mental in character, half materialized, semi-materialized, that mind can influence even more directly because it is approaching domain of mental vibration. Consider the whole range, degrees of vibration. So in the biology, the body must accumulate and organize material which is more and more refined until it barely is material. It is semi-material, subtle, physical, even mental in its character, but still attached to the physicality. And that's very difficult to form and to hold and then to put into organization. If it is somehow managed to be put in organization, there is a whole paraphernalia of biological machinery to sustain it, to nourish it, and to protect it. That's why the brain has all this extra protection. That's why the nervous system has all that encasing. And that's why the body has to put so much energy to feed and to support the brain. They say that something like 80% of the body's energy is being used up by the brain when we are thinking. The proportions are not important. The idea is it's a huge amount. If at that point you are trying to digest food and you're thinking intensely, the blood is directed to the brain more than the stomach, and the digestion is affected, interestingly. So there's an automatic prioritization to give the mind its support. Equally, you observe the nature of the nervous system and the intricacies of the connections of the brain cells and the neuronal connections. We find they're in a constant flux. They're changing, reconnecting, modifying. Within the connections, there are changes taking place all the time. The whole thing is in a flux, so fluid, changing rapidly from second to second, even across milliseconds. Nothing else in the body at a biological level is changing so rapidly. This is the subtlest, most sensitive substance that the body has been able to build. And the more it is able to build, the more the mind can embody without dulling itself, without losing itself. Now you see why the biological base can be so important. If the biology is tuned for vital energy and physical strength and does not give enough to the refinement of these higher tissues, the mind can get in, will get dulled. It will be closer to the animal ape in its strength, but not in its intelligence. If in the evolution there is a push to developing mind, all the energy is moved to developing this finer substance. As a result, there is depletion of other tissues. And not enough energy or nourishment is given to them. The body tends to become weaker. If you observe carefully, professor of philosophy, professors of mathematics will not be physical hunks. They'll tend to be more weak, more refined, more sensitive, and vulnerable to health and problems. Generally, it is a great achievement in evolution when nature is able to produce a highly developed power of abstraction of mind and a strong body. And she's taken a long time to fuse these opposite objectives. And once she has got to that, she wants to protect and preserve and develop that. And this is where the evolution, the biological evolution, can assist the higher consciousness evolution. Similarly, if the nervous system extending in the body has very fine lines, fine threads of connections on the skin surface, for example, there are nerve endings. If you touch with two sharp points at the back of the hand, you cannot distinguish 2 points. You will distinguish only 1 point, unless you separate more than half a centimeter. Because the nerve endings and their refinement of the awareness is still very gross. Between men and women, there's a huge difference. Women have far higher number of nerve endings on the skin than men have. It's the reason why for them the sensory contact on the skin is far more intensely and felt in greater detail and connects immediately to thought and emotion. For men, there's a dulling. We do not know what it's like to have sensitive skin and skin that feels and connects to your emotions and thoughts easily. And so nature has built these variations for whatever objectives, but they are all malleable. They can all be changed. In our human evolution, if we work on developing body consciousness, if we work on developing skin consciousness in early childhood, the number of nerve endings actually grows. And you as a male can have as much or more of nerve endings as a female because you worked on it. Or similarly, a female who has not been provided the necessary support for the nervous system's development may end up with dulling of those sensitivities, and so on. The idea here is the biological evolution parallels the psychological, spiritual evolution. When we make an effort in thought and in consciousness to become more aware in the emotions or in the body, it actually changes the biological processes and forms, especially if done early enough. Even later, changes do happen. There are increases in the brain connections because you are in creative thought process in a regular way, because you're learning new skills and new activities. So it is found, for example, that with age, there is a degeneration of the brain. But if you are in activities which involve new learning, that degeneration can be halted or even reversed, and new generation of brain cells takes place. If you went back barely 30 years ago and read the literature, they will say brain cells once formed, they can only die, they cannot grow. But 50 years ago, the mother said, every time you're studying and learning new things, more brain cells are created. That was contrary to the medical wisdom then. Today, medical wisdom has caught up and it actually says, yes, even at late age, brain cells can grow. In other words, biology, and especially the part that connects to mind through the life force and nerve system, is in a constant flux, responding to the mind's will. And when mind forces itself to become clear and trains itself to become clear in identification with the body, the biology changes to match and to support this. After that, you may stop making the effort, but the change in the biology continues. If you do not use long enough, the biology begins to decline gradually. So you see here a very important dynamic taking place from mind to gross body with the mediation of life energy. Again, the quality of life energy makes a difference. If your life energy is dense, gross, and crude, not refined and not subtilized, the link between the two will be passionate emotions. You have skill of fine thinking in the mind, but you're swayed by your passionate emotions. But if the emotions have been made refined, the energies have been made clear, you're able to think clearly, you're able to wield your emotions, and the whole personality follows mind rather than pushing mind. The connection is both ways. So the body can push mind, mind can push body. Quality of energy can push mind and body, and vice versa. And this is the reason why a good training can make such a huge difference for the rest of the life's journey. And if you get it early on, the imprint in the body is literally made permanent. There's something that takes place. We do not yet fully understand what. That kind of completes its formation at the age of 21. The very interesting researchers pointing to this. Just one example is they observed people who started smoking before 21 and after 21. Those who started smoking before 21, that is before the formation of the physical body frame was completed, they had damage on the edges of the genes, what they call telomeres. They were damaged. Those who started smoking after 21 didn't have that damage. The smoking is smoking, isn't it? It should be damaging all the time. But once the formation of the body is imprinted on a physical level, somehow afterwards the damage is not as much. It will have other forms of damage, but at a genetic level, that low level form, it was not so damaging. You'll have lung damage and other things, but they're superficial. So what you do before 21 in terms of your habits, physically, biologically, emotionally, and intellectually, and most of all spiritually, leaves its imprint in the formation from genes up all the way to organs, even shape and form of the body. And this is the reason why the mother organized here in the ashram one of the most comprehensive physical training programs for children, which melds smoothly with the emotional and intellectual training. But at the physical level, a wide, rich variety of activities touching all parts of the body, and as far as possible, developing that in an atmosphere which has the spiritual support and with higher aspirations and values. To the extent that children have not contaminated themselves with other vibrations in between, it leaves an imprint of the body on the body that one can even recognize in adulthood. Oh, this person has gone through a special training. One can even recognize certain characteristics of the vibes. I remember because in Delhi, they formulated a similar program based on the ashram, in the Delhi ashram. I remember once I was in Madras with a friend who was in business, and while I was sitting with him, somebody came for some business discussions. And both of us stared at this fellow. There's something very familiar about him. And somewhere along the way, it moved after the business discussion was over. They started talking about their background. And then the fellow said, "Oh, you are from Pondicherry." "Yes, I grew up in the Delhi ashram from my childhood, and I visited Pondicherry once." So it was not the Pondi visit so much. And then he pulled out, he had a blessing packet he had received at that time. It's the training he went through in a similar kind of environment, a similar kind of training. And you could feel it in the body vibes. There was something distinct. All of this makes a huge difference. And this is the reason why in the Indian tradition, culture, parents tend to be overprotective of children until they get into full adulthood. In many other cultures, especially in the West, they let the children do pretty much what they like. Okay, you're now old enough, you can experiment, try drugs, do this, do that. It's normal, I did it, it's okay, you do it. It's extremely harmful. Once you've had those drugs, the imprint is like the smoking, it's left on the genetic level. the consequences of which remain with you. Now, of course, there's research to show that those who have smoked pot and weed, they have certain damage in their memory and their perceptual powers, which are seen often a decade or two later. But the damage took place right then. The effect of it was masked by the vitality and the energies of the youth. And it's when those vital energies weaken that you see what's really below. And then the damage emerges. So all of this is just maybe a bit of an excessive elaboration, but these are implications of what we're describing, the link between the mind consciousness, body consciousness, and the mediation of life force. All of this is implied in this very simple picture. Whatever the age, if we begin to work now on our body consciousness, we can begin to change these things, even down to a genetic level. It takes a little longer, takes a little more persistence, but when there is a persistence, there is a result, there is a change. Especially if in this effort, there is equally the infusion of a spiritual consciousness, for which the mind is the first point of reception. You receive the descent of a spiritual consciousness and imprint that into your thoughts, into your emotions, even into your body tissue. And as you continue to do this, as you work on it in activity, in meditation, whatever form it takes, as you imprint it, it changes their rhythms, their habits, and then their substantial quality. The mind becomes as if filled with light, clear, fresh, bright, transparent. If you saw it with the subtle sight, you would see the mind in a certain mental consciousness in a person is dark. And then as the light settles, enters, it becomes clear, transparent. And the same with the life energies. You feel the vitalities are tense, they are sticky, they are instinctive, pushy, reactive. And as the spiritual consciousness dissolves those knots, clarifies and purifies them, the vital energies become clear, streaming, flowing, responsive to mind and spirit. And the same even in the material consciousness. When a person comes out from this deep concentration, when they have been in deep communion with the divine presence, you feel a glow on their face. They walk and you feel their body, something glowing, some kind of a beauty. And these are reflections in the material substance of the spiritual influence. When that is sustained, it changes even material substance. And so it does not matter, whatever the age, whatever may have been our past, maybe we were fortunate or less fortunate. Right now we can begin to make a difference, and we should. And recognize this nature of the link, mind, body, linked through life force. And so when with the mind you want to change something in the body, let's say you have a stomach ache, and with your mind you want to imprint on it a shift, a change in the consciousness, in the rhythm of the stomach, the habit of the body to not digest certain foods, whatever it is you're trying to change. The link point being energy. The secret is with the mind to grip the energy and infuse in the energy the imprint of change that you want. And then through the energy, the imprint moves into the gross body. You cannot directly imprint on the hand, for example. Let's say you have a cut. You want it to heal fast. You stare at the finger and say, heal, heal, heal. Doesn't change. But mind can feel the body sensation. So already the part of the mind embedded in the body is felt as distinct from the mind, separate from the body, but they are linked. So you've got close enough, and then feel the energy there. The energy which is linking the mental awareness of the finger to the tissue and substance of the finger. Feel the energy and imprint in the energy your intention to relax that part, to heal it, to infuse in it extra clarity of consciousness, a visual image of the fully healed, perfect hand, finger, whatever it is you want to do. You imprint into the energy, and then from that imprint, you will it into the physical consciousness. Then it has an effect. I have a friend who, this is something Sri Aurobindo actually describes in some other portions, how the mind must grip the body through the life force. So I have a friend who used to do bodybuilding for about 2 hours every day. And he would come away with this swollen muscles. And in youth, they enjoy that kind of feeling and all. And then he read this passage and he said, well, let me experiment. So he began consciously while doing exercise to feel the life force, imprint on his life force, and then from there to body. And very quickly, within a few weeks, he found he could take the same dumbbells, do it slowly, not 100 repetitions, not 2 or 3 sets, slowly 5, 10, 15 repetitions, but with his full attention on the life force and through life force body. And he would stop and the muscles were swollen. Swollen as if he has been exercising 2 hours. And he would do this for the body. In 20 minutes, he was stepping out of the gym. And others would say, what? Your body, because you can see the difference when the muscles swell up. You've been exercising 2 hours and you've got it in 20 minutes. What's your secret? But this is really the principle. And when applied directly, you can very quickly, rapidly influence the material. So nature installs the base of these dynamos in the material body she has formed, making these bodies the ground for her stations, and connects the mental with the material by a nerve system full of the movement of vital currents, through which the mind becomes conscious of the material world. That's through the mental current that the mind awareness is connecting to the biology, and through biology, experiencing the world. So in other words, light from the material substance reflecting enters my retina, generates an electric current, which then interfaces with the mind through the complex network of the brain. You remove the current, I'm blind. Retina is intact, eyeball is intact, but I cannot see. But the current, remember, is life current. So a strong emotional knock can make you blind. Nothing is damaged physically. And to cure it, you have to intervene at the level of the vital energy, and suddenly the person has sight again. There are many cases like that where they do not find anything wrong biologically. And this is where the correction is required. Similarly, you have a trauma, a traumatic event as a result of which you lose certain capacities. It's the current in between which has been damaged. If you heal the current, suddenly all the abilities return. But you notice the mind is not seeing the physical world directly. The mind is entering in engagement with life force, which through body is registering physical world. So the inputs from the physical world through the senses rise through life force into mind. The will of the mind to act similarly moves down the current through the nervous system on the muscles, and through the muscles, the finger moving, acting on the physical world. The link point is life force currents. But life force currents, unless they are purified, add their own mixtures. So as I was watching, I was observing something. Because I was emotionally distressed, what I saw and registered in my retina got mistranslated in the transfer to the mind. It got exaggerated or distorted. And there's a huge distortion taking place there. When the distortion is large enough as to make you quite dysfunctional, somebody smiles at me, and I interpret that smile as a scorn. That person looked at me and he had the scorn. Somebody else says, no, but he was smiling. Oh, you don't know, I saw it. I don't realize that the eye registering in the mind received distorted information from the emotional disturbances. So many of our relational problems, even psychiatric problems, are coming from this kind of a mix-up in the transmission. Or in the reverse. I want to do something, I want to say something. I go with all the good intention. By the time it translates through the energies, it takes a very different form. I come out as too aggressive, too impersonal, too insensitive. I didn't mean, I was smiling to you. I just came out from this meditation, I smiled at you. And you say, no, you didn't smile, your face was stiff, you didn't smile at me. Oh, is it? I don't know. Because in my meditation state, I was disconnected from the body consciousness. When I've come back, in my mental consciousness, I gave a broad smile, but the connection of the nerve energies to the physical had not yet fully engaged. It did not translate in much. My Lips moved slightly, a little bit. And it didn't look like a smile anymore to you. Which same thing, when I'm fully embedded in the body, it would have moved fully. But in my mental consciousness, I felt myself fully smiling. It didn't get translated. So all of these things we can better understand when we see how this relationship is present. You notice here, I'm tempted always to look at the physical analogy. The image he's using here is so fascinating. He says, making these bodies the ground for her stations and connects the mental with the material by a nerve system full of the movement of vital currents. Do you see these radio transmitting towers? The transmission is taking place at the top. The ground station is where the thing to be transmitted is assembled, and in between is this current of electricity, right? It's exactly the same thing here. You see, the symbol is so powerful. That's why we call it a symbol. Sri Aurobindo explains, symbols are truths of a higher plane represented on a lower plane. So much of what nature creates in her forms and in her processes are symbols of realities of the spiritual plane. And they inevitably take this form because that's the form's representation at a lower level. So when we create a broadcasting station, we end up having a broadcast raised on a height and a link in between of energy current to the thing which is below, because that's the most natural way to do it. That's the symbolic representation in matter of a universal spiritual even truth. So mind becomes conscious of the material world through these vital currents, and so far as it chooses, of the vital world of nature. In this intermediate passage through the vital currents are also linking to the vital domain, and mind can, if it concentrates on the feel of the vital current rather than being obsessed with the end point of the sensory machinery. If you feel the energy flow through which the information is flowing in and out, then you can open out sideways there and sense the vital world also. So all of our experience of the physical and vital world is through these currents which are organized in us. If these currents in the evolution were not sufficiently organized, we are dull to the physical world and dull to the vital world. On the other hand, when they're fully organized, then through the physical consciousness, we can experience the world rich, bright, clear. Children listen, they hear a much wider range of sounds. As we grow older, the ears become dulled, isn't it? We don't hear high pitches and low frequencies. Our world has shrunk. Our experience of the world has shrunk with age because the biology breaks down or the life currents break down, weaken. The same person, if I infuse in you a huge amount of life energy by whatever process, you'll find suddenly the world is brighter, richer, clearer. Like when you've done a lot of exercise and your energies are blooming, you look out and the world seems so much more beautiful, vividly. Colors are more rich. Once the energies go down, again it becomes dull. But the reverse is possible. If we cultivate the energies and the physical sensitivity, we can see the world in a widened range through the senses and experience even something much more, a mingling of the senses. All this is in the realm of possibility and an inevitable outcome of the evolution. But equally, not only the physical world, the vital world, we can sense in this way and enter in these interactions, feel them, respond to them on those levels. When first one begins to do that, we sense the vital world through the senses which belong to the vital level instead of the physical. So for example, you receive a parcel. Without opening, you feel what kind of content it is. If you don't touch it, you may feel, but that's more difficult. When you touch it, you can feel more easily. If you shake it a little bit, you're able to feel even more clearly. Because you're first touching a level of energy which is close to the material, where you're comfortable. But if you train yourself bit by bit, you can abstract all the way until you can sense without touching. So you can go through a whole training program in this way. and open to the subtle senses. And on the vital level, when you sense through the subtle senses, you notice they're not as limited as the physical. The range is wider, but distances are greater. You can sense through the wall, sense what's happening in someone's heart, someone's mind, and so on, even at a great distance. And all of these belong to the training of the vital. Most of what is called parapsychological or psychic phenomena, they're all in that domain of the vital. But who is registering the experience? Still your mind. I, the mind, sense these things through the subtle vital senses. So as far as it chooses, it can also become aware of the vital world of nature. Otherwise, the mind would be conscious of the mental world first and chiefly, and would only indirectly glimpse the material. So if this connection and embedding in the body was not there, as mental beings, we would see the mental world right now. We don't see it because our mental body has been embedded in the physical, and as a result of it, dulled so much that we vaguely sense the mental world. We see only the physical world. We are locked in. As it is, its attention, the mind, its attention is fixed on the body and the material world in which it has been installed. And it is aware of the rest of existence only dimly, indirectly, or subconsciously, in the vast remainder of itself, with regard to which superficially it has become irresponsive and oblivious. The larger part of us is in the vaster mental consciousness, a tiny part of which has got fully embedded in the gross body, dulled and locked in through the physical senses, and all the rest we are no more responsive to consciously. We don't know what's happening there. But a huge exchange is taking place on those levels, which reflect in our emotions and our outer personality. And we don't know where it's coming from. Oh, I just got a nice idea. At the same time, somebody else says, I have a brilliant idea. We both speak the same idea. How did that happen? Something happened on that level. Had we been conscious, we would have felt the idea entering, we would have felt where it had entered, and three other people in the group who also received the idea, but it didn't come all the way to the surface. You see the difference? So, there's so much happening of which we are totally oblivious, dimly, indirectly, subconsciously aware. But here, attention is fixed on the body and the material world. It's like, as an analogy, a monkey in a cage. The grilled bars, but at the back the cage is open and opens out to the forest. But he's obsessed in looking through the bars. His hands are gripping the bars and he's trying to push his way through the bars. Get me free, get me free. You have to let go. Let go of this engagement with the physical senses and the physical body. Turn upon yourself, and then you discover your consciousness is actually a little wider, and you enter this wider space, and then wow, it opens out to the whole universe. I'm free. And from this freedom, I can re-engage with these bars and the limited material consciousness, but from a poise of freedom. But the still bigger freedom comes when you disengage from the mind consciousness itself. Then you have the consciousness of the self recovering. That will be the theme of a later part of the discussion. But first, right now, just as he showed in the vital, there are two levels. The vital consciousness fixing in the body. Similarly, with the mind, there is a fixing, different degrees of fixing with the vital and the body, which creates for different human types, which description we will see later. But just in the next paragraph, he says, the soul identifies itself with this mental dynamo or station and says, I am this mind. And since the mind is absorbed in the bodily life, it thinks, I am a mind in a living body. Or still more commonly, I am a body which lives and thinks. So you see the degrees of identification here. You can be mind in a body, or you can be body who has a thinking mind, depending on where you've identified more. And you can shift these identifications. So we'll see that next time, next Friday. We have already taken up all our time. Just quickly, if there are any questions or any comments, we can take them up.
3 questions. One is that
relevant to this?
So actually, what happens is in the mob, the classrooms, which I used to conduct in that initially when the people came, they say, we want to go to Marina Beach, this, that, and look at the temple and all. And we learn ourselves in Google and this and that. So I had a couple of failures. Then afterwards, I told them that there are some pre-questions you have to attempt and there is a post-questions. Then afterwards, I have observed there is a great success because after reading the questions were so much deep, they could not answer and things like that. Then after 3 days, constantly they were immersed in study. And then after 3 days, they felt that we missed this. Why that thing comes?
Yes.
That's why I want to.
Interesting.
Second thing is this during the drink party, it is observed that those who are non-drinkers, the drinker fellows are so much praising them and giving money also, they don't worry about that. And they come under such influence that they will also, non-drinkers also start doing that. And third is how to deceiving oneself and deceiving others, that faculty. How to remove, as Mother has suggested in the transition consciously, how to do that. So if you find relevant, you can give.
Yes, no, these are interesting observations. The most important capacity of the mind is to be able to bifurcate itself. Life force cannot do that easily, body cannot do it easily. Mind as an awareness is able to split itself that a part can stand back and observe the rest of it. And if this part is in intention sincere, then we recognize where we are deceiving ourselves. And that's why all the correction for distortion begins in the mind. Because it's the only part which is able to stand back and begin to observe its own distortions. And then from there, from that correction, it ripples down through the life energies and the physical habits.
Is there a fear of restriction of the body? It happens in a claustrophobic atmosphere in the head.
Yes.
I don't like that.
Yes.
It doesn't feel,
Yes.
I don't feel myself.
One feels claustrophobic. If you notice people who feel claustrophobic, who have a problem of claustrophobia, something either of their mental or their vital consciousness is very large. I've seen this often with businessmen who have large vitality. You'll see in their business, therefore, they don't do small transactions of running a shop. They do a business which is spread out over huge distances, dealing with transactions across the world. So their consciousness is also to that extent either extended, or because it was extended, they are drawn to activities of that kind. And they have huge problems going into small space because it conflicts with their sense of I. I'm being crushed into this. I'm actually larger than this box. And so I feel extremely uncomfortable. And once you recognize this, then you can help the person to deal with it by becoming conscious of what it is that he's feeling uncomfortable with. It's his vital body, which is larger, his aura, mental, circumconscient, whatever terms we use. And therefore, in the space you're sitting, you first align yourself. If you're in an aeroplane where you feel claustrophobic, you sit in the aisle, and at the back, so you see the full range in front. So already to your sight perception, there's a greater distance. You don't sit at the window, you don't sit in between, you don't sit in the front. So, and then in your consciousness, you're aware that you are still this large person. The plane is inside you. You are this big person. So in this way, one can habituate a person to overcome and to get free of claustrophobia.
It comes in the movement of car also.
In the movement, it's not claustrophobia, it's motion sickness. Yes, that's different. There again, you have a disconnect between two experiences. Some part of you feels this movement of the car moving, and another part feels that you're not moving because your reference is the shape of the car. The car is moving with you. But another part is feeling reference of the movement in relation to the ground, to gravity. So the method they use normally is, you say, you look out of the window, look at the stable horizon, and then you don't feel the motion sickness. But also the other thing, you open the window the air hitting your face, that also clouds this double awareness. So in simulators, often when they make you go through this kind of a jerky movement, they put a blast of air on your face so you don't get motion sickness. And that the rapid movement of the face on your skin surface confuses all these different movements, gives a blur of the whole disconnect, and then you don't feel motion sickness.
But such persons, they don't have difficulty in sitting in one place for hours together.
It depends. That varies. Depends on the restlessness of the life force. If the life force is restless, you can't sit for long. But if you've calmed your life force, you can sit as long as you want, then you can get up and walk as long as you want. It's a fascinating passage and brings great clarity, not only in our sense of identities, but how they entangle into each other and the characteristics of each of these three layers. When you act as one person, one personality, one character, which is your bundle of habits, it's a mix of all these three tendencies with one predominant layer or center, which also may move depending on the activity or time of day. When I get up from sleep, I may be on one. Later, when I'm tired, I may be another. And so my whole behavior changes. I may be more interiorized, more exteriorized, more in the mind, more in the vital, more in the mind embedding in the vital or in the physical, or in the mind which is now dulled by a physical vitality depleting. Weakening of the link point in between makes me distracted. I'm unable to hold attention on the physical senses. My mind wanders off to its mind world because I can't grip my physical senses. All of these changes in my behavior and capacity are just a play of dynamic between these three levels. You understand each of their characteristics and their interconnections and how they influence each other, and everything becomes not only understandable, but you have then the means to modify, to change, and to create new patterns, new habits. It's a very fascinating passage. And he ends all this after discussing the mind and different levels of identification. He says, now all this is a mixture of truth and falsehood. Mind, life, matter exist, and mental, vital, physical individualization exists as facts in nature. But the identification of the soul with these things is a false identification. And how to disengage from that identification to recover ourselves. And from that recovered consciousness, we can reconnect with these without fully identifying or losing in them, and wield them as our instruments, as our tools. If I had eyes on the tips of my fingers, I would think I am finger. Because my eyes are here, I can watch my finger doing things and I say, I have hands. Isn't it? I have fingers. When the consciousness is embedded on the tip, you're lost in it. When it stands back, it can wield the tip freely without being lost in it. And that's the station we will develop from the self. I have mind, I have life force, I have body, and I am operating in the universe on these three levels. And I can develop higher gradations of levels of consciousness and expand my full experience of the universe and engagement with it. That will be the view of the liberated consciousness, which we will come to. And the process to do that we will be discussing later. Oh.